Hello everyone, it's Professor Enoch095 back with a simple deck profile where this time around I'll be showcasing Ominagruzio Masques deck. So this time around I've been doing like a lot of testing with this deck, and so far this is pretty much my own list. This is a list that I'm pretty satisfied with so far. And originally I was thinking not to build Ominagruzio Masques because it's kind of like it's not my aesthetic, but then it's revealed it's supposed to be Dark State, so I think you know what, it's a Dark State deck, so why not build it, right? Considering I have like a huge amount of like Dark State staples that I have, so might as well just build it itself. So this time I'll be like looking at the Ominagruzio Masques. So the main point of this particular deck in itself was because it kind of lowers the defense of your opponents, while also denying their trigger, their trigger damage, their damage triggers at the same time. So that's twice as dangerous already in a Masques turn. So yeah, so that's pretty much like the whole entire list of probably entire reason why I want to build Dark States in the first place, right? So before we get straight into the deck profile itself, I just want to say, if you do enjoy my content over here, please do hit like and subscribe and stay tuned for more. Without further ado, let's get straight into it. Now, before we get into the deck itself, I would like to introduce you the right line, which is, of course, the first of all, our starter, Kyoganju Amanakiti, Evil Eye Beast Amanakiti. So it's a very standard starter. As a generic D starter, if you went second, you draw one, so it's pretty self-explanatory. It's a very nice cute cat. That's about it. And then you will have to run Amana Croak, Kyoganju Amana Croak, Evil Eye Beast Omina Croak. Where the skill is that act Vanguard once per turn. This one is on a Vanguard circle once per turn. You soul blast one, you look at the top 5 cards of your deck, and you choose up to one Ominagruzio, grade 3 or greater Ominagruzio, then reveal it into your hand, then you shuffle your deck. If you did not reveal, you get to soul charge 2, so which is good, because not only it allows you to bounce Ominagruzio or Ominagruzio Masques into your hand, so thereby like you don't really have to rely on Mask of Hydrogram to look at your top 5 to get one. If you have look at top 5 and then you get the Masques, the grade 3 Masques, so I think it's already pretty good enough. Otherwise you get the soul charge 2, which is pretty good in itself, because this deck requires some level of soul charging, not too much, but it's ample enough for you to proc Misery Wing, which we get straight into as well. So we're gonna have to put with Amana Croak for the time being. And then we have Kyoganju Almina Olzu and Evil Eye Beast Almina Ols. So Almina Ols' skill is that when this unit is when rolled upon Amana Croak, you search your deck for up to one trigger unit and you move it into your soul, and if you did, you get to draw one card, which is pretty nice, because this is the setup for you to technically try to like set your cards in your bind zone. So usually what I do first, if I have to determine the matchups, let's say for example, if I know that Youthberg plays fronts, I would probably shove in the front first. If there are some decks that plays draws like Chronojet, I probably have to shove draw first, or like something, depending on the matchup, you may never know. Or otherwise, you can always be safe and shove in a crit, because people will always play crit regardless. But usually what I would definitely do was to shove in either the draw or the front first, because you might lose the 10k, you might lose the 20k shield, but then again, it's a good setup for you to try to shut down the opponent's those kind of triggers early game. And yeah, and it's really important for you, and not to mention it allows you to draw one, which is also pretty nice, right? So that's Amana Ols for now. And then after that we have Kyoganju Ominagruzio. This is the Evil Eye Beast Ominagruzio. So the skill is pretty simple. So it's an auto skill. When this unit is placed on Vanguard Circle, you look at the top 5 cards of your deck. If you can choose one Ominagruzio or Mask of Hydrogram from among them, reveal it and shuffle your deck. So technically speaking, it's also like widens your search. Not only you can search for the grade 3 mask, the mask form, but you can also search for Mask of Hydrogram. So in this particular list, you probably notice something that I did not play, and I'll probably tell you my justification, but I think you probably know what I'm not putting in this deck. So it's going to be like It's good for several reasons. Not only you can search the mask form, but I can look for the mask as well. So in order for me to like persona right into mask of the Masques form as fast as possible, which is nice. And then the Act Vanguard once per turn, you Soul Blast 1, you choose one trigger from your drop zone and bind it, and during this turn your opponent's trigger effectors was bound on this effect does not increase power. So if I bind a crit and the opponent damage checks a crit and the damage trigger is kind of like nullified, it's not trigger effect, it's the power increase. So the opponent doesn't get a 10k increase, but they still get to have heal, they can still draw, they can still get a front. The front power really doesn't really do much. The crit and the front doesn't really do much. The heal and the draw will definitely proc. But yes, that's the purpose of this. The setup for like binding cards in a bind zone. So that's what it's supposed to be. We have Ominagruzio, and then after that for the main deck itself, simple explanation. We will start with the grade 3 persona, right? I think this is self-explanatory because you need to have as much of mask of the originals as possible in order for you to remove it for the mask skill and try to like bind as triggers as fast as possible. Granted, you can always discard this as your mulligan. Not mulligan, you can always discuss this as for your riding, just because you can use it for like say for example you discard it for riding, and then after that you can ride it, and then for the next mask turn you can just technically just remove one from drop easily and bind your triggers, right? So that's technically very good in itself. So I play 3. Of course, in also some certain situations, if you feel like you want to bind at least 2 more triggers and you have a mask in your hand, you can technically also write this on the Vanguard, then you prop the top 5, then you Soul Blast 1, and then you bind the trigger, and then you write in the mask form, and then you just remove the this original Ominagruzio, and then just bind another trigger, which means that it's a bind 2 triggers per turn. So it's technically very nice, right? So already, if you have like your first riding on your first grade 3, then you proc the skills already. Then if you ride it again, you can already bind 2, and then you can just technically write again, Soul Blast 1, bind 1 more, and then persona right to the mask deck, and then you get to bind 1 more, so it becomes 4 already. So that's pretty nice. So I think 3 is definitely enough, and it's really highly recommended. After that, I play 4 Ominagruzio Masques. So Ominagruzio Masques is the mask form for Ominagruzio. So this Ominagruzio Masques skill is pretty simple. So the first skill is definitely very straightforward, is that you can only write this on a grade 3 Ominagruzio. And then Act Vanguard once per turn, you either remove one original Ominagruzio from your hand, soul, or drop, and you can choose up to one trigger in your drop zone, bind it, and during this turn the power increase does not activate, long story short, and whatever is in the bind zone, the triggers in the bind zone, you minus the 5k shield. So technically speaking, if let's say I have found a crit, then the opponent's 15k crits will definitely minus 5k, so it's gonna be like a 10k shield, right? And if I bind a front, and if the opponent is playing like effect fronts, they're gonna minus 5k shield, so it's gonna be like become a 15k shield regardless. The draw trigger is gonna be like a simple 5k shield. Of course, if the opponent is playing a vanilla 5k shield, that's even worse. But I think at this current meta, nobody plays the vanilla draws or something, unless you're on a budget. But yes, so that's the entirety of the shenanigans of the skill. And then last but not least is the auto skill Vanguard once per turn. At the end of the battle that this unit attack, you counter blast 1 and you shove in 2 rear guards, back row 2 rear guards are close, and then you can restand it, and during this turn it gets drive -1. So it's pretty dangerous as well. Not only you can shut down opponents' defenses, but you also like restand, thereby forcing them to guard more or force them to no guard. So Ominagruzio Masques is definitely one of the scariest decks and annoying to fight against, or to fight against. So that's why 4 is definitely self-explanatory. It's a must. But yes, the third one, which will be we're going with Mask of Hydrogram. So Mask of Hydrogram, I play 3. I find myself not to play 4 because I will brick most of the time if I do. So technically speaking, it has the following skills. If you play this order, you look at the top 5 of your deck, cards of your deck. You either find the Masques form, or you find the Dragon Tree among them and add it to your hand. Then you shuffle your deck. So technically, you can also you can look out 5. You can find either the Masques form, or you find the Grade 2, Grade 1 Dragon Tree Ratchets like Skull Camtel or Demon Streeder. Then you put it to your hand, then you shuffle. Now, and the second skill, which activates in the drop zone. If you do not have a Grade 3 Vanguard with Masques in this card name, you reveal one Masques Grade 3 from your hand and reveal it. Reveal it. Then you write the card, then you write the Masques form as stand, and you shuffle it into the soul. And if you did not activate Persona right during this turn, you activate it, right? So it's pretty very simple, very strong, very self-explanatory. But then again, I'll play 3, but I would not play 4 because I find myself breaking. So this is my must-have in like almost all the mask stacks at this time. So yes, that's about it. So that's 3. And now we're moving on to the Grade 2s, which is Misery Wing Dragon. Now Misery Wing Dragon is definitely one of the MVPs of this MVPs of the deck, because he is technically your high attacker. So the fact that he can swing for big powers in a very situation where you lowered your opponent's defenses is pretty scary in itself, and sometimes it wins games for me. So that is technically a fall off, right? So Misery Wing skill is that continuous trigger circle during this turn for every type of trigger in your bind zone, this unit plus 5k. So if you have 4 types of trigger in your bind zone, this is going to be like a 20k, so he becomes a 30k attacker. If you account for the persona right, he's going to be like a 40k attacker, which is like pretty insane, I would say. Not to mention that let's say that if you manage to do 5, and if you have if you manage to bind including your over trigger, you'll be swinging for like at least 35k at the very bare minimum. And if your persona right turn is swinging for 45. If you're playing a Dragon Tree, if you have a Dragon Tree marker, that's gonna be like swinging for like 50k, which is like pretty insane as well. So yes, for Misery Wing, which is going to be like makes a hard time guarding for makes your opponent have a hard time to guard with. And the skill is that when this unit is on place on Rearguard Circle, if you have 2 or more different types of trigger in your bind zone, you soul last 2 and you get to draw 1. So this is also your draw engine as well for Misery Wing on place. So yes, this is why I felt like there are some cards here that requires you some form of soul charging. So that's where I want to really proc this skill. But of course, you don't really need to draw much unless the circumstances requires you to do so. Otherwise, I felt like I find my hand size pretty thick most of the time. So probably because I draw a lot. But then again, that's I digress, right? But for Misery Wing is a must-have. And then for the new support, this is technically Lindalkia. So Evil, I think it's a red eye of Dominator of Red Eye or something. Lindalkia. Lindalkia is a BT13 recent support, so she is technically super good in Ominagruzio. And her skill is that when this unit is placed on Rearguard Circle, if you have a Vanguard with Masques in its card name, you counterblast 1, you look at the top 5 cards of your deck, you search a card and you search a Grade 3 or less card from which is different from her name and call it to Rearguard Circle. So this same grade, so if you so I think you can always call a Grade 3 or less anyways, because by the time you are on your Masques turn, she technically procs. So yes, you look at the top 5, then you call 1, then you shuffle your deck. You can choose 1 trigger from your drop zone and you bind it, right? So that's pretty good. It also helps you to speed up the process of like binding cards in your binding triggers in your drop zone. So Lindalkia is definitely a 3. Some people can play 4 off, but then again, Counterblast is a little bit too heavy in this deck, so I will try to play it at 3. And not to mention that if I can have this in early game, if I have like at least 3 cards in my drop zone, I think it's already pretty good enough. So if I use the original Masques to bind 1, then Ominagruzio to remove 1, then I can always use this to technically proc it 1 more time to proc her skill to actually bind 1 more trigger, so which is pretty good. So Yes, and the second skill is then continuous rearguard circle. During this turn, if you have 3 or more types of if your trigger, if your binding zone has 3 or more triggers, this unit plus 10k, so she's going to be swinging for 20k. In a Persona right turn, she'll be swinging for 30k, which is kind of nice. Doesn't really reach like good magic numbers, but at least it's good enough to be a strong attacker on her own, and not to mention that she managed to can fill your board pretty easily, and not to mention that the reason why I play her is because you can call out some important cards for, like, example, Misery Wing, or in certain situations if you do not have the Ruin Collector in your hand, you can probably try to clinch your chance to properly call one out and do the shenanigans of like the back row thingy. So Lindalkia is definitely a 3 for me. You can run 4, but I think 3 is enough for me for the time being, so that's Lindalkia for now. And now we have the right recyclers, which is Lamina. Lamina is also is technically the ones that where every nation gets the own right recyclers. If you discard this card from your right phase, which is the first skill, when this unit is discarded from your hand during your right phase, you soul blast 1 and you move this card to the bottom of your deck and you get to draw 1. So this is also some sort of like a pseudo draw engine as well. Not to mention her second skill is precisely the reason why I really want to run her. The skill is that when this unit is placed on from hand to the rearguard circle, if you Persona rolled during this turn, you counter blast 1, you choose 1 card from your soul and call it to the rearguard circle, and you may soul charge 1. So it has several reasons, because I feel like Lamina is also pretty good in this deck. Not only she allows you to draw if you discard her the right phase, but you also get to, technically speaking, call some of the very important engines in your soul to either fill your board for, like, say, I can call Lindalkia, I can call Misery Wing, and I can, technically speaking, I can call out a Ruin Collector, because most of the time if you do not have like any other Ruin Collectors in your hand, you can technically just call her out, counter blast 1, and choose a Ruin Collector from your soul and call it out to the back row rearguard circle. Thereby it's easy for you to easy for Ominagruzio Masques to try to restand. So I think 3 is definitely a good quantity. Of course, if you want to play 4, I think that's pretty up to you, it's debatable, but I think 3 for now is pretty nice. And yes, that's about it. And I use it in like really dire situations where I do not have like Ruin Collector on my on my drop zone, so in my hand, so I have to rely on the ones in the soul to call it out. So Lamina is there, right? And after that, moving on to the great ones, I think we can, showcase to you. This is Gangram. So Gangram's skill is self-explanatory. I think everybody knows what it does. So when placed on rearguard circle, you get to soul charge 1, which is interesting in a sense, because I think you can always soul charge like some of the key cards as well. Or you can soul charge your Masques, you can soul charge your Amano, you can soul charge your trigger. But if you soul charge your trigger, that's and that's at least better in a sense. You don't really get to lose a lot, because you can technically with his second skill, act rearguard once per turn, you get to soul blast 3 and you get to draw 1 to increase your hand size. But then if you soul blast the triggers, you can technically use either of Lindalkia's skill or Ominagruzio's skill to try to like bind it out, so which is not that bad, right? So I think Gangram is technically 2 off, but then again, I really don't want to soul charge a lot. No, I don't want to draw a lot, so I think technically speaking, I think 2 is definitely enough. But he's there just to help me to fill my hand size in case if my hand doesn't have like the key cards that I really need, like for example Mask or the Great Trees, or like Misery Wings, Ruin Collector. So he technically helps a lot in some games. So yes, I would say play 2 of it. And now for the staples of Ominagruzio, so this is technically a 4-off. This is the staple card, which is Ruin Collector. And so when this unit is placed on rearguard circle, you may soul charge 1. So you may, unlike Gangram, you have to mandatory soul charge. You can choose to soul charge, right? So and that's not the point, but the point is that if second skill, continuous rearguard circle, if you have a Vanguard with Ominagruzio in its card name, when paid for the cost as shoving a rearguard, this may be regarded as 2 rearguards, right? So you remember when I said that Ominagruzio requires you to like shove in 2 back row rearguard circles? Well, if he is in the back row rearguard circle, he technically can be considered as 2 instead of like having both at the same time. So so this is where I say that Ominagruzio is Ruin Collector is really staple for Ominagruzio, and 4 is enough, no more no less. That's what he's supposed to do, and that's about it. So effect PGs, self-explanatory. If you have 2 or less cards, you can 2 or more cards, you discard 1. Otherwise, if you have 2 left, you can just Kanzen without discarding the cost, and then you Kanzen without discarding the cost. So 3 effect PGs, and of course I have Elementaria. So Elementaria is the Blitz order, but it's also a Sentinel at the same time. So yeah, technically speaking, if I have a matchup with Gradual, I think this is really important. So I can just pay without paying the cost. But of course, by using this Blitz order, you have to remove it from the game. So that's it, right? So that's all the main deck for the main deck, and now we're moving to the triggers. Well, it's still the main deck, but here's my triggers. 2 effect draws. I think 2 of the draws and 2 of the fronts, I think is pretty enough good for me. So effect draws, give yourself a 5k shield if your opponent is a grade 3 or grade 3 or greater Vanguard. So yeah, pretty nice. Originally I was running like maybe I can run non-infect draws and 1 effect draws, but I think in these particular circumstances you may never know when you draw the non-effect, so I think it's a little bit wonky, but then you can always discard it for something else. But I think the 10k shield is definitely welcome, I would say. So yeah, I played 2 of that. And then after that, I have the 2 effect fronts, Natalia. So it's a 20k shield because it gets a 5k shield if your Vanguard is opponent's grade 3 or greater. Then again, depending on matchups, whether or not I want to shove in either the draw or the front by the time I write to my grade 2. So I have to know, I have to rely on like knowing what kind of like miscellaneous triggers they're playing. If they're playing draws, I will shove the draw first. If they're playing fronts, I will shove the front. But then again, losing the 20k shield, 10k shield is not that big of a deal because you need to Soul Blast it out, and then after that you can just Soul Blast it out, and then you can do it for binding, and that's about it. It's not that much, but I think it's pretty solid on its own. And I play 7 crits, no effect crits, because at this point I really don't like to play effect crits already. At this point, it's really not that necessary. Where's my other crit, by the way? Okay, so this is my 4 crit, like 7 crits. So no effect crits. Screw that. And last but not least, well, technically not the last yet, second last, 4 heals, which should be. So in this current meta, if you feel like you want to, you want to switch it out for anti-stance because of my goal, or something like Lianon, I think it's also good itself. If you want to, you can always play the anti-crit also as well. If you against Youthbird, against Drajewald, I think it's also pretty fine. Probably 1 of each, or probably 2 of one type. So for me, I think 15k shield, I think, is probably good enough. But then again, I can always like try to debate whether or not I can play the anti-crit on the anti-restand. So I think this would be probably good enough for the time being. So that's okay. But 4 heals, that is nonetheless, the ones that I really need to play. Last but not least is the Dark States Over Trigger. Now, Dark States Over Trigger, it's technically the one of the good option for Ominagruzio, because if I try to drive check it, and it will give my Vanguard continuously like 10k 1 crit. So not only that my opponent needs to at least guard with more than they should, but it also gives the pressure, the critical pressure. So in a particular sense that let's say for example the 20, let's say I swing for like a 23k with a trigger included with Ominagruzio Masques, and with a double crit, their opponent probably have to think twice to give me like at least 2 to pass, which means like they need to force out at least like two triggers and 1 5k shield in order for them to give them like 2 pass, right? So I think this is also like pretty good card for Ominagruzio to try to like force out as much as possible, while also like minusing their shields at the same time, and also doesn't really rely on their damage, their trigger damage. So which is pretty good, very pressuring. So in particular sense, some people have argued that I could technically also play Blue OT, but I felt like Blue OT is not as pressure as I thought. But then again, I feel like Dark States OT would probably suits the best for Ominagruzio Masques. So just because of the restands and whatnot, right? So I think that's pretty good enough for the time being. So I can always, this deck is always subject to change, always, depending on the metas as time goes on. But yeah, and probably there are also some alternatives I can offer to you. I know nowadays people don't really play Short Spada anymore, but Short Spada technically is also good for her second skill, is that act rearguard once per turn. If your opponent's grade 3 Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you bind a trigger in your soul and she gets 10k until the end of turn, which means she's a 10k booster in a lot of circumstances, in that particular circumstances, which means that she can technically boost for high power or attack with a, 18k, so which is making it very awkward moments to guard, because you need to force like 10k shield at the very least. So Short Sparta, I would argue, probably not as much playability now, but of course you can always go for Goman, which is the Desire Devil Goman, I think, because you can like move to the soul and then you counter blast one and force your opponent to two or more to guard. But then again, for that particular card, I think because the opponent will always at least tries to 2 or more to guard anyway, so it really doesn't really work for me. Yeah, I've tried it out. The effectiveness is not as there, but that's how it is. But also you will probably realize that I don't play Skull Camda in this deck, mainly because it's not because of the whole not generating the Dragon Tree markers. I think it's still fine. I think without the Dragon Tree markers, it still hit like a truck. But the fact that he requires the Counter Blast one, makes it like I will need to think twice if I want to play this card. But technically speaking, I always have room. I might kick out Gangram if I want to play Skull Camda. Otherwise, the CB one, which at least in this deck you have to use at least one Thunder Blast per turn anyways. So I think you can reserve it, one for Ominagruzio Masques and then probably one for Lindalkia. But early game, or early game, you might at least use 2, because you probably have like Ominagruzio Masques and Lindalkia. Late game, you might also need one for this one and this one, for like if you do not have like a Growing Collector in your hand. It's debatable. I think it's a mix, and I think it's like always like switching out like what would be a ideal play. But for the time being, Skull Camda, I'm not gonna play Skull Camda, but I think I can leave that for the near future, probably for some minor update as well. So I think that's it for now. This is my Ominagruzio Masques deck, and yeah, I'm gonna end this video right here, right now. If you have any questions, if you have anything that you wanted to ask, or if you feel like you want to comment on like how would you build your list differently, feel free to put it down in the comment section down below, and we'll see you guys on the next video. And yeah, and before that, let's do a little bit of like a combo before I end this video, just to showcase to you what you're supposed to do, right? So give me a moment. Okay, so let's go for the mulligan thingy. Now we are at, let's get to draw 5 first. And so, we have already masked in the deck. Okay, so this is technically not a bad hand, per se. You can technically try to choose for like, say, all the triggers to go back to your deck. But if you want to reserve it for like guarding, I think it's pretty okay also. So for this particular purpose, I think I'll probably not to do it for now, but then I get to draw 2. And okay, this is not as a bad hand as I thought. So yeah, let's go and discard it and switch it out, and then you can try to shuffle the deck for the time being, and then we can go up, and let's assume we went second. We went second as well. So the key to this particular deck was that you have to bind your triggers as fast as possible. So if I go second, I think it's pretty good enough, and then I can technically go for Persona, right? So assume I go second, I draw 1, and I can technically discard this mask because I don't really need it, because as long as I have a 1 mask in my hand, I think that's pretty good enough. And then you write Ominacroak, and if I went second, I get to draw 1. So I think your Gunbrum is okay, fine. Then you use Ominacroak skill to Soul Blast. Soul Blast 1, you look at the top 5 cards, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Whiff, but that's okay because you can Soul Charge 2, etc. And then just hope for the best that you don't Soul Charge anything, you don't Soul Charge an OT. But I think that's gonna be the likelihood is supposed to be 0. Then cut the deck, and then soul charge 2. Maybe you can soul charge. Okay, the enemy is not that bad. Okay, Q. Okay, sure, it's bad, but that's okay. Then you swing, then you drive check. There's a PG, but that's okay. You damage check. There's Ominagruzio, and then it's your turn. Then you stand and you get to draw one, and then you have a Lamina, which is also quite nice because you can do it for your shenanigans. Either at this point you can either proc Lamina first or proc the owl, but for me I rather proc the I probably have to proc Lamina first at this particular case, so you can always soul blast your triggers, which is important. So if you have a trigger in your soul, it's important for you to soul blast your triggers as fast as possible. And then you bot deck, then you draw one card, and then I draw a crit. So the skill for Aminos, you get to soul blast one. And let's say, for example, if my opponent has a draw trigger, I usually shove in a draw because it's a 10k shoot anyways. You know, I can always get to draw into the front trigger for my extra defenses, but I usually, like, you know, my justification was that usually I shove in the lowest shield value first. Then I get to do on this random shenanigans. Then I get to draw one. I drew back into another Lamina, which is kind of nice. So this has never happened to me before. Then I swing, then I check the Vanguard. Again, the heal. So let's say, for example, if my opponent hasn't, you know, I can heal one technically speaking because I just heal one, and then I can heal the Ominagruzio, which is technically very good. So if you like damage check, Lindalkia, and then let's say your opponent want to rush you, you might want to guard with crit in your hand because you need to have at least, at this point, I have like 2 triggers, so which is technically good, just to speed things up. And if I draw, that's technically also nice. Damage check. Oh shoot, I have the OT. Never mind. I draw one. So this makes things a little bit awkward because if I had another single counter blast, I could have done something else. But I draw one, and at this point, I think you can also start discarding Lamina already. And then you write to Ominagruzio, and then I'll proc the Lamina. I proc Lamina skill first, then I soul blast the draw trigger, and then the bot deck, and then I get to draw one. Misery Wing, then I use Ominagruzio skill. I look at top 5 cards of my deck, and at this point you might think, you know, or the Mask of Hydrogen, but I think since I have one mask in the drop already, you might probably not want to fetch it back. I have technically one, so technically speaking, what I can do is I can either ensure that I can have a Persona right next turn, or I have a Ominagruzio just to remove it. But at this point, I think I want to have a Persona right, so I just bounce it back to my hand. Otherwise, you can always bounce this Ominagruzio back to your hand, then you can shuffle, then you can use it for next turn. And that's about it. And as we shuffle, you can probably like say, this is just a removal. Okay, and then after that you can try to use Ominagruzio skill to soul blast one, and then you choose one card from your bind zone. Let's say I just bind a crit, for example, right? Bind a crit, then I can use the Masker skill, move to soul, and then I get to Persona right, and I draw one card. So okay, sure. See, it kind of works out in some cases. Sometimes you break, but that's okay. And then you use Ominagruzio Masques skill to try to like remove it, and then you can bind the heal already. So that's also pretty nice. And you can always call Misery Wing Dragon. Then you soul blast the mask on the original Ominagruzio and the mask out, so you can always use it for removal. And also, if you write to Ominagruzio again, you can always like use it the skill in the drop zone to Persona right to your to your Masques form. And then soul blast 2, I get to draw one card, which is okay. It's a crit, but that's not that bad. Maybe if I don't have anything in the soul, I probably have to rely on Nangram to soul charge a Ruin Collector, see? But then again, I can only use one CB. But let's assume, for the time being, I'm just gonna like, you know, damage it for the time being, okay? Let's assume that if I have a Lamina in my hand and you have 2 counter blasts to spare, you can at least, like, since you Persona rolled during this turn, you counter blast 1, then you choose one card from your drop zone and, you know, call Lamina out. But then again, you can choose whether or not you want to soul charge, or you should choose not to soul charge, right? Or something along those lines, right? Otherwise, in this particular case, let's say, for example, if I have like at least, let's assume that I have 1 Ruin Collector in my in the hand on the field. And then I have like hypothetically speaking, if I have Lindalkia as well, you can do counter +1. Or let's say, for example, if I don't have a Ruin Collector on the field, I can call Lindalkia and then get to look at the top 5 cards of my deck. You can always call it out, see? You can always call this Ruin Collector out and try to fill up your board. and also like use it for the cost of like your Vanguard. And then you can choose one card from your drop zone and one trigger from your drop zone, and you can bind it. So thereby, at this point, you have like 3 triggers in your bind zone. You know, hypothetically speaking, if like by the time you can like guard everything and whatnot, if you got leaves, if you guard with a front trigger, and then you PG or something like that along those lines. Let's say I'm gonna have to discard I don't know, simple crit trigger, then you stand and draw. Then if you feel like you want to persona right, I think it's fine. Let's say for example in this particular situation, in some games you realize that you might use the over trigger to guard late game, or for example, so let's assume this is a late game. You've guarded with an over trigger, you have like 2 more triggers that you need to bind. What you're going to do is that you always write to top 5, and then you look at the anything that you needed which you don't have, which is the mask or either the Ominagruzio Masques. You can technically try to use the skill one more time, so last one, and then you can bind the OT. And then if you have the mask form, if you have the mask hydrocode in your soul, you can always try to persona right, and you draw one. And then the skill that if you can remove one Ominagruzio from your right line, and then you can bind your front, and thereby you have like 5 cards in your bind zone, you know, as soon as, you know, as fast as possible. So I think Lindalkia helps to turbo this kind of like combo a lot so far. So in some situations, if you realize that you know, you've soul charged like at least 3 triggers, and if Lindalkia in your hand, I think it's a very optimal perfect situation where you can bind your triggers as fast as possible. Granted, because in that particular scenario, what I showcased to you, but I got an over trigger, which is kind of bad. But if you have like 2 damage checks, if you have 2 open counterblasters to work with, I think it's pretty good enough. So yeah, I think that's my simple demo as to how this deck actually works. And that's about it. I hope you can get an idea of what this deck is supposed to do. But then again, it's not that hard. I think for most beginners, I think this deck is not as difficult as many people would think. So this is a very fun deck to play with. Although it's not really meta-ish, the fact that you can able to shut down the defenses of your opponents is like pretty annoying. It kind of annoys them as well. So I would say that if your opponent, like say, if you really want to grab this deck, I think it's highly recommended for you. You know, it's fun. And it's very cheap to build at this moment. Originally, Ominagruzio Masques came out around like 40 plus or 30, 40 plus, but now it dropped price. So I think it's also a good starting point for like beginners to try to build this deck as well. And that's about it. So that's Ominagruzio Masques, and I'll end this video right here, right now. So yes, as usual, you know, hit like and subscribe. Comment down below if I did anything wrong, or I've said anything wrong, or just pointing out some things that you might be different. It might be different in your mind. And I will end this video right here, right now. This has been Prophecy 095. Seeing you on the next video. So goodbye.